A quick disclaimer before we begin, the PEMF podcast does not contain any medical advice, and the content provided is for informational purposes only. If you have any health concerns, please visit a healthcare professional. Welcome back to another episode of the PEMF podcast.
And today we're going to be talking about PEMF and sports recovery. We kind of spoke a little bit about this in our episode with the guys from Privacy of Manchester about how they use PEMF in their practice to help their athletes recover quicker and help them get the extra 1%. But we didn't really go back into what's actually happening in the body and how you can actually use PEMF to get these results for sports recovery. And that's what we're going to cover in this episode. We're going to talk about how you can use PEMF to reduce DOMS, some studies, and everything that you need to know about PEMF and sports recovery. But for anyone who this might be their first episode, what is PEMF just in a nutshell?
So in a nutshell, PEMF therapy stands for pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. It's usually applied with a full body mat or a localized applicator. And we are talking about creating an environment in the body, in the cells, treating the body at cellular levels to either heal quicker, recover quicker, or perform better.
Okay, so what are some of the ways that it can actually help someone recover after exercise then?
There's loads and loads of ways that PEMF therapy can help with either a top athlete to get the 1% or just a garage gym owner or, your average gym goer. Simply, we are just creating the perfect environment to heal in the body through different mechanisms. And these include reduced inflammation. So again, something we talk about quite a lot. And if we can reduce inflammation within an area, especially an area that we've maybe either damaged during training or you're just getting inflammation through an area through DOMS, which we'll come to. If you can reduce the inflammation, then that can help with the recovery process. You can also enhance blood flow with PEMF therapy. So that is going to help on a number of different things in terms of recovery, but it's also going to help with performance. So if we're separating the blood cells, we're carrying more oxygen around the body, that's going to help in terms of recovery, healing, and also performance. We're also going to speed up muscle repair. So that's something I mentioned a minute ago, which is DOMS, which stands for delayed onset muscle soreness. That's going to kind of like stimulate the cellular repair process, especially people that are trying to build muscle. DOMS is a good thing for them because they're trying to rip the muscle and repair it and build muscle. But if you're getting someone maybe that is in like football or sprinting, for example, DOMS may not be so great for them because they want to keep training. So we want to reduce the pain from DOMS and we want to get them training more effectively. That comes on to kind of reduction of pain. Obviously, pain in training and in physical fitness is usually not a good thing, not a good symptom. But if we're getting pain from DOMS, it's from overtraining. But if we're getting pain from an injury, obviously that's where we want to heal the process quicker so that we can go back to training. The other thing really with PEMF therapy is improving the range of motion. And obviously with flexibility and mobility, that's going to allow athletes to perform better and reduce the risk of injury. Lastly, we'll come on to ATP, but we'll talk about that in a little bit more in depth in a minute.
Yeah, definitely. And you briefly mentioned in there about the blood cells separating. There's a really good diagram we've got of this on our Instagram. It'll be linked below wherever you're listening from. And it's actually real blood cells under a dark field microscope and how they go from stacked to unstacked after just a short session of PEMF therapy. But you mentioned at the start of the episode about professional athletes actually using PEMF. Is this kind of a popular thing within professional sports teams?
Yes, it's amazing. Actually, I've been involved in the PEMF industry for now 10 years. And when I first got involved, our customers were only ever chronically ill people. So we never, ever really saw people using this in a professional setting or, to enhance performance. But we're seeing this more and more over the years. And it's amazing now that we're seeing PEMF therapy in American sports teams, in the MLB, the NBA, more and more and more. So there's also a load of posts that we shared before with German football teams using it on Instagram. So that's something you can go back and look at. We've even now in the UK, we're seeing football teams like Manchester City who actually bought a device directly from our company, NewMed. They bought a super high intensity PEMF device for kind of fixing issues as quick as they possibly can. So one of their football players goes off the pitch with an injury. They were using PEMF therapy to get it healed, to get that player back up and running as soon as possible. Myself personally, I actually sold a device to Cristiano Ronaldo. So it doesn't get, when it comes to football, it doesn't get any higher than that at his peak of his career. And again, we sold him a quite high intensity device that he was using on a daily basis, more so to improve performance than recover from an injury.
Okay. And you said about more kind of recreational athletes using them. Is that common as well?
Yeah. So by recreational athlete, we mean me. I'm an average kind of gym goer, use PEMF therapy on a daily basis. And I'm stacking my PEMF therapy device with a decent red light. So I'm getting the two at the same time. And I'm really using it for preventative maintenance and just kind of performing and training at the best of my ability.
Okay, great. And we're actually sat next to that little setup right now. So we've mentioned a few times about PEMF helping with DOMS. How can it actually help with this after exercise?
So DOMS is basically like muscle micro trauma. So it's where the muscles lengthen under tension and tiny tears occur in the muscle fibers. So like I mentioned, like in bodybuilding, this is a good thing. You want to build the muscle. And it's an inflammatory response which causes a sensation of pain and stiffness. Also, you've got fluid accumulation, a build-up of fluid of white blood cells in the affected muscles. This increases the pressure on the surrounding tissues and contributing to the feeling of soreness. And it is quite weird how some people experience it the very next day. Some people it takes a little bit longer. Myself, I'm actually suffering from a bit of DOMS from a workout I did over the weekend. But that usually subsides over about 72 hours or before. And what we want to do with PEMF therapy is trying to speed that process up because, like I say, if an athlete has pushed it a bit too far for one training session and then they're out the game for 72 hours, it's not an ideal situation for them to be in. So they want to get training as quickly as possible without that DOMS, that pain that comes from DOMS.
So how can then PEMF help with this?
So PEMF therapy kind of promotes the cellular repair by stimulating production of ATP, and that's what I mentioned earlier. So ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It's basically the energy currency of the cells. So by exchanging ATP production, PEMF accelerates muscle cell repair, helping to heal the microscopic tears in the muscle fibers more quickly, reducing muscle damage and soreness.
And is there actually any studies for PEMF and DOMS?
Yes, there was actually a really good study done with PEMF therapy and DOMS that was done by a university, and it's quite a lengthy study, so we won't go too much in detail, but we'll link it at the bottom of this episode so people can take a deeper dive into that study.
And yeah, that will be available on the Instagram, as you said, linked below. On the Instagram as well, loads of other really great PEMF related studies. Also one talking about reducing inflammation and reducing the whole cytokine response, which we just mentioned a minute ago. So yeah, there's loads and loads of stuff on there. But going back to the questions, can PEMF actually improve performance, or is it more just primarily a recovery tool?
Yeah, so more regularly we see people using PEMF therapy like chronically ill or for recovery from injury and that sort of thing. And that's when people tend to turn to PEMF therapy. But actually it can be used as more of a performance tool as well. So if we can increase the circulation and the blood oxygen levels within the body, obviously that's going to lead to a better performance. So we did a podcast with Proactive Manchester, and you can find that in one of our early episodes. And they're talking about getting the extra 1% from their athletes. So people actually come into them on the morning before an event, using their PEMF therapy devices and actually getting a better performance that day. And the other thing to look at is probably about reducing the risk of injury too. So it's not only just getting better performance, but also reducing the risk of injury whilst using PEMF devices.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the Proactive guys actually mentioned a cyclist who used it before an event, and he said he saw a massive improvement in his kind of game as such because he used the PEMF before he went out for the day. But talking about athletes, some athletes do deal with kind of stiffness or joint tightness or muscle tightness. Can PEMF kind of improve the flexibility and joint mobility?
Yes, so PEMF therapy is often used to kind of increase the range of motion. So athletes dealing with stiffness or joint tightness will also benefit PEMF therapy. So you can reduce inflammation around the joints, and that's going to improve also the blood flow around the joint, which is going to help in turn restore a full range of motion. So we've mentioned it on another podcast about osteoporosis. PMF also have been shown in loads and loads of different osteoporosis studies to improve joint stiffness and the range of motion.
Talking about joint health, can PMF actually help rebuild cartilage as well, or repair cartilage?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one for me because cartilage, one thing, once cartilage goes, it's a very difficult thing to repair. And PMF therapy is one of those modalities out there that can actually really help with cartilage repair. NASA found that PMF was helping to rebuild cartilage. And we also had a guest called Jess Clark on the podcast, she was a professional, or is still a professional women's footballer, who was playing at an international level for England, who was kind of bone to bone on with no cartilage, and she had a lot of problems. She was using PMF therapy, and she kind of says that saved her career. So that's a great podcast to listen to as well. But there are also amazing studies out there that show cartilage regrowth using PMF therapy.
But quickly stepping away from post kind of exercise or workout use of PMF, what about pre-exercise? Can it help pre-exercise?
Yeah, there was actually a study done to see if PMF could improve muscle readiness and responsiveness to exercise. In this, researchers got 20 semi-pro cyclists to see how PMF therapy would affect muscle activity during exercise, focusing on its impact on oxygen supply and muscle performance. They actually did a cycling exercise while getting PMF therapy. So they had a loop placed over the legs, and EMG activity was measured. So was their blood lactate levels. The results showed that when PMF therapy was active, there was a noticeable increase in muscle activity during the initial warm-up phase. And the increase suggests that PMF therapy can improve muscle readiness and responsiveness to exercise. But furthermore, they also found that blood lactate levels were also higher during the PMF, which typically leads to increased utilization of glucose by muscle during exercise.
Okay, great. So we've kind of spoken about pre-exercise, post-exercise, but what about just kind of preventative measures in general, kind of preventing injuries from kind of even happening in the first place? Can PMF be effective for this?
Yeah, 100%. So regular PMF therapy will indeed play a role in injury prevention, and that's by enhancing the blood's overall resilience by improving cellular health, increasing circulation, like we mentioned before, reducing inflammation. PMF strengthens muscles, joints, and bones, making them a lot less prone to injuries.
Okay, great. So we've mentioned earlier in the episode about athletes using PMF devices, but what devices do you commonly actually see them using?
Yeah, so this kind of determines on the application and what you're trying to get out of a PMF therapy. So as I mentioned before, Manchester City bought a device from us, and they wanted to buy the highest intensity device they could buy. And their main outcome for using a device was to kind of speed up the recovery of localized injury. So they wanted something with a paddle applicator to apply directly to the area at the highest intensity that they could apply it, so that they can kind of speed up those recoveries and get their player playing kind of back on the field quicker. But like myself, I call myself a garage athlete. I just want to use something a lot lower intensity at home, something that I can use a lot more safely, quickly, and more effectively in terms of using it over kind of months, every single day use. What I do is I use a full body PMF system, and I'm stacking that with red light therapy. So I'm kind of getting the best of both worlds in terms of ATP production and using it through red light. So kind of intensity wise, you don't necessarily have to go so high intensity even for athletes when you're using it at home. I use on a daily basis a lower intensity device, something around the range of 50 to 100 Gauss, and that's kind of all you need.
And yeah, as you say, some athletes have PMF devices at home, like similar one that you might have, and they just kind of use that on a daily basis. But should they be using it on a daily basis? How often should athletes be using PMF?
Consistency is key, and I always say that with PMF therapy. So it's not something you really jump in and out of. If you just want to treat an injury, it's that common like painkiller methodology. So if you've got pain, you take a painkiller, it goes away. You don't take painkillers until you get pain again. It's not really the methodology we want to promote with PMF therapy. We want PMF therapy to be used on a regular basis and used for more of a preventative maintenance and performance, as well as when we've got an injury and we're trying to recover from.
Okay, great. So say someone now has a PMF mat and they're using it for preventative stuff or just kind of after workouts and whatever. How long should their sessions be if they're doing it every day? Do they literally need to spend the second they get out of the gym and they sit on it all night? Or is it just a short amount of time? How long roughly?
So if you've got a low intensity system, ones that you mainly see in home, ones that you can fold up and put away, I use mine once a day. I don't use it for any more than that. And it's a 10 to 20 minute session. So I'm not like taking up my whole life with using PMF therapy. You can get PMF therapy. You can use it at desk now. You can even, it's always about incorporating a PMF device into your life rather than fitting your life around a PMF device. So try and find one that fits into your life well. And as I say, it's like a 10-minute, 20-minute session per day. It's not a lot to dedicate to your health.
For sure. And PMF and sports recovery as a whole is a topic that we could probably do an hour, 2 hour long podcast on. But obviously, we're not going to do that today. We've got lots of guests lined up and planned who are in a similar field and using PMF on athletes. So make sure to follow us or subscribe so you don't miss that episode. And if you're on audio platforms, while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review so we can make bigger and better episodes every single week and get bigger and better guests on.
If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave them below this episode and we'll try our best to get back to you. But thanks again for listening to another episode of the PEMF podcast.